Welcome back to the Innovative Agency, everyone. Sharon Toerek here with you again. Looking forward to another interesting conversation. And this one about a topic that I don't think we've really addressed in this way on the show before. And so you communications pros will really want to get something to take notes with here because we're going to be talking about press releases and all the hidden art and science behind them that you may not be considering as you think about how to get your clients' stories out into the world. And so, to do that, and joining me today is Mickie Kennedy, who is the CEO and founder of eReleases. And Mickie, I really appreciate you making time to be on the show today.
Oh, it's great to be here.
Yeah, looking forward to the conversation. So, press releases, and every once in a while, we cover one of these topics on the podcast that seems so tried and true. We did one recently on email, for example. It seems like it's been around forever. Like maybe there's not as much new under the sun as you might think, but where we discover all kinds of hidden opportunities and sort of these classic tactics that are a part of the tool set of many agencies, but really could be leveraged for so much better effect for the client brands. And press releases strike me as one of them. So, first of all, what got you inspired to sort of um, build a whole business around this sort of discipline and communications practice?
So I transitioned after getting a graduate degree, I think around 27 years ago, into a telecom research startup. And I was employee number three. I had writing in my background, albeit it was creative writing. And they wanted me to figure out press releases and send them to the media. And we were faxing at the time. I was sending out like data, like I remember one was like inbound and outbound traffic between the US and several Caribbean countries. And I would send them out and not much would happen. And so I kind of made it my mission to figure out what I was doing wrong.
Okay.
And what I realized was that journalists want a story. And I was giving them great data, but there was no story behind the data. And so I went and, I noticed just looking at the Caribbean country traffic that one country stood out as like having way more inbound and outbound traffic to the US than, pretty much all the other countries combined.
Mhm.
And so I asked around, and the reason for that was it was basically the center for call centers, 1-900 call centers to and from the United States. I guess this was in the early 90s. And
Mhm.
so uh, I wrote a press release about that, included some of the same data that I had previously included, and all of a sudden that press release resulted in a story in the Financial Times, The Economist, Washington Post, Wall Street Journal, and either two or three telecom trade publications. And
Wow.
I was like, wow, maybe I've figured this out. And so I continued to do press releases. Um, it was a lot harder because, just having the data, I thought we could just issue that. So I was always having to look over the data and say, what's the story behind some interesting things happening here? And so I would continue to do that and, get those anomalies and talk about those things and generate press releases and send them out. And we continued to get lots of media pickup. I remember one of the things that we noticed was, if you looked back over the years, you would generally see a spike in developing countries, often 2 to 4 years before they had major, major economic growth.
Right.
And all of a sudden, when that got published in a few articles, I think again, Wall Street Journal, maybe Barron's. I think there was a couple of other little financial publications that picked up. We started getting customers that were not our usual customers. We usually sold to telecom attorneys, telecom companies, and telecom analysts. And all of a sudden, hedge funds and investment people were buying our reports. And so it was really exciting because we were expanding our customer base and we were just driving sales and getting a lot of activity as a result of these articles being published. And so I just said to myself, we're a small startup. Why aren't other people doing this? And I realized that it was largely, money. A lot of people can't afford big giant PR campaigns. And so that was sort of the impetus for starting eReleases. I built my own database of journalists that I sent to by email. That was also a great transition that I saw. Every time I do a fax, I get calls and journalists say, "Hey, in the future, could you just email this to me?" And I was like,
Mhm.
"Oh, that's so much easier than
Right, no
programming a
kidding.
fax machine."
Yeah,
And
yeah.
and so over the years, PR Newswire approached us. They liked what we were doing. We were working with startups, small businesses, entrepreneurs, individual authors, speakers, people like that, and they wanted to support us. And they offered a discounted state distribution or city distribution, and I declined. I wasn't interested in that. My clients are looking for national distribution. They charge $1,600 for a 600-word press release today, and so it was a big ask. My customers at the time were paying like $300 to me, and so they didn't run away. We continued to talk. I met them. They showed me their editorial office, and one of the things they mentioned was that they had to have a editorial team, albeit very small, overnight in case there's breaking news or they need to get something out to Asian markets, or just something happens. And but they don't do much. They're very idle. And I said, well, I could schedule my releases for next business day by default, and then your team overnight could set them up and it wouldn't cost you any additional labor. And at that point they said, okay, we'll give this a try. And ever since then, people have been able to get a national distribution through PR Newswire, through us, plus extra little bonuses that I've got them to throw in, like used to be called micro lists. Now they call them Cision influencer lists. Basically, they're just little emailed discrete distributions to
Right.
very targeted journalists. And all of that for a fraction of the price. So, one of the people always go, why would I go through you when I could go directly to Newswire? And I'm like, because it will cost 3 to 4 times more if you go directly to the Newswire. And
Mhm.
if you are a qualifying business, most small businesses and startups, are, we don't work with publicly traded companies. We don't work with companies that are making 100 million plus in revenue and things like that. So, we do have, we don't want people to take advantage of our pricing situation that we have with the wire. But we just take those large people and refer them directly to the Newswire. But it's been really great. It's given so many small businesses access to the wire. In the United States, if you're not familiar, there are basically two wires that people, specifically journalists, utilize, and that is PR Newswire and Business Wire. There was a third wire. This changed names a few times, but today I think it's Globe Newswire, that tried to enter the market, and it didn't work. I mean, at the same time, newspapers and traditional print and media hasn't been doing well. So journalists are busy and expected to do more. Used to, journalists could get by writing 2 or 3 articles a week, and now some journalists are doing 2 to 3 articles a day. And so they are busy. And the idea of going to fish in 3 ponds in order to feel like you're reaching everybody, they're not willing to do it. And
Right, right,
so
right. No, I get that. Yeah.
so Globe pivoted, and they specialize now just reaching publicly traded companies that are really looking to meet disclosure requirements, but they don't really care whether a journalist is really looking too deeply at them. In some cases, they actually probably prefer that. And it is substantially cheaper than going directly to a proper newswire. There are other wires that people are probably familiar with, like Associated Press, AP, UPI, Reuters, United Press International, places like that. And they work by a different business model. They don't move press releases over their system. They move articles that they've written. And so, a newspaper would just license an AP article and run it rather than
Right,
have their journalist write that article, because their
right.
journalist is busy doing other things and things like that.
Many of
Despite
us who used yeah, many of us who used to have, vital, high quality, locally run newspapers now have, publications that are almost entirely populated with that kind of content, so I
Right,
get it,
right.
yeah. Um, this is fascinating. So what I wanna ask you is, I have to believe that with all the press you've seen over the years and with all the press you've placed over the years, you've got a strong point of view about um, how to get your message in front of the right people in the quickest amount of time. And what's some of the low hanging fruit there that agencies need to know when they're building communication plans for their clients that include, earned media? Um,
Right.
I'm sure they're missing big opportunities, and I'm sure you're seeing, where those are. So, what are some of the things they ought to be thinking about?
So, I guess one of the big things that I do is I champion the education and that people should be doing strategic types of press releases. Um, and by strategic, I mean, releases that matter, that are newsworthy. A lot of people have an event that's important to them. You have a new product coming out. How do you communicate that in a way that gets a journalist to want to share it with their audience? Their job is to be a gatekeeper, deciding what, rises to the occasion that they either want to educate or entertain their audience, and ideally both, with an announcement. And so you just having a new product doesn't necessarily rise to that occasion. And a lot of people, when they do a new product release, it really is, here's our new product, here's a list of features, and here's a page to learn more about it. And
Mhm.
journalists are natural storytellers, and they like a story arc. It's one of the things that I've discovered, like, 26, 27 years ago.
Yeah.
And so, one of the things that you could do with a product launch press release is inject a use case study. Share someone who had, what their obstacle is. Like, hey, this company was losing 12% a year of losses, and they used your product or software solution, and as a result of it, at the end of 90 days, they were showing that they would have a 6% profitability. And so, that's a really powerful sort of story, an arc that sort of utilizes what your product or solution does, and then have a quote by them talking about, something positive about it. And it sort of helps to fulfill that story arc that a journalist is looking for. And again, it's one of the things that people don't, I think, normally think about, and they really should, because I think that what happens is that we we just assume that uh, what's important to us is important to them, and it's not necessarily the case.
Mhm.
And so, these strategic types of press releases, these strategic types of ideas, there's something that basically anyone can do. And at the end of the day, it is one of these things that you can sort of tailor and incorporate into what it is that you're announcing. And I think that that's one of the things that you should look out for as an agency. There is one type of press release that never fails. So if I have a client that's very discouraged, they've done PR and it hasn't worked for them, I tell them to do a survey, an industry survey, and ask some really interesting, timely questions to other members of people in your industry. Yeah, these are probably your competitors, but that's one of the great things. A lot of people don't may not even know about you. So, put together, I like, 12 to 16 meaningful questions. I like Survey Monkey, 4 questions per page.
Mhm.
That way, if they stop midway, you still got half their responses. You end up with a link.
Oh, that's
You,
a
you
good tip. I like
yeah,
that. All right,
yeah.
cool.
You,
Yeah.
you you end up with a link. You then go and approach a small or independent trade association in your industry. Do not go to the big guys. The big guys have their own media team. Everybody knows them, so they don't need a lot of publicity and PR, and they don't want to share it. But if you go to the smaller independent ones, they will see this as a media opportunity for them. You approach them and say, "Hey, could you send this link to your members? We're looking to get at least 100 responses in a survey, and we'll be issuing a release over PR Newswire, and we will include you as well for sending the release out." So for them, they see it as an opportunity to get a little media attention themselves. And, by telling them that you're looking for 100 responses, if you don't get 100, you can circle back and they can push it again on social media or email to sort of get those numbers back up.
Mhm.
And then they send it out. You're going to look at the results and figure out what would surprise the industry. What is the one question that stands out among all of those, and focus a press release on that. You're going to build a page on your website with all the questions and answers, because a journalist can go there and figure out other stories that might be available
Yeah.
there. And you're then going to provide an amazing quote as to why you felt the numbers skewed a particular way. An example might be, people in say graphic design, 63% believe that their job's going to be replaced in the next 5 years because of AI. And you might have a quote that says, hey, I believe that this is a little bit of an alarmist reaction, but I do believe that the majority of people who do graphic design, who don't utilize and know how to incorporate AI, are going to be at a very serious disadvantage in the next 5 years if they don't start an education now. And so it's a way to sort of stand out, provide a little expertise. People are going to see you as an expert in the industry by authoring this survey. So it's a really great way to leverage a lot of attention and to really be recognized as a leader. And every time that I've coached someone through this, they generally receive as many as 8 to 14 earned media articles from a single press release. And the least I've ever had anyone get is 4 for someone who is in the biometrics field. And
Mm.
they were still quite happy with that. So, there are these types of releases that are more strategic. They are more likely to yield results. One of the biggest, I think, criticisms of press releases is that they don't work. And I'm the first to say that probably 97% of press releases out there do not generate earned media. And unfortunately, most people look at those releases and then they copy them. They're like, oh, this person had a new hire. Let's do a new hire
And here's a
press release.
roadmap. Yeah.
And so you really have to sort of think about what is the industry and the people who report on you and your type of companies. What would really interest them? And sure, having major milestones is important, but how can you then take that and incorporate elements that makes it more likely that a journalist would be attracted to you?
Mhm.
Having an amazing quote, something that if they were to take it out and paraphrase it, there'd be a ache, a loss, because what you said was either, beautiful or really powerful. You really paraphrased it and made it so succinct and strong and powerful that them paraphrasing it would be seen as a weakness. And so that's one of the ways to have a really strong quote, because that grabs people's attention. Sometimes being a contrarian is a really great way to stand out, because so many people take the same approach of everybody else. There's something in the PR world called I, what is it? It, it eludes me at the moment, but
Okay.
it was very newsjacking. It was very trendy, I guess over 10 years ago. And if something was really hot in your industry, everybody climbed on board with their approach on it. When Target had a credit card breach many years ago, there was over 1,400 press releases about it over the next 30 days. So if you're sitting there joining the chorus saying, you need a security audit, and uh, we think this is important, everyone's saying the same thing. But
Yeah.
if you raise your hand and say something completely different or counter to that, you stand a much more likely chance that not only do you get picked up, but every time someone writes about this topic, which is very hot, that they'll incorporate you, because journalists like to be fair and balanced. And if you have a contrarian viewpoint, they're much more likely to inject you in every one of those articles. Now, the likelihood of that happening every article is unlikely, but it's not unlikely for a contrarian person to get picked up in 30 or 40 articles when there's been several hundred of them published, because they were the only person who raised their hand and said, I have a contrarian viewpoint to what everyone else in the industry is saying. And
Mhm.
so these are the types of things to really just stand out and be strategic.
Right. I love it. So I'm hearing use case studies to sort of build a story arc. Consider developing a brief survey. I'm also hearing collaborate with a strategic partner so that they can be one of your information gathering and distribution partners in getting the information out. Consider taking a contrarian viewpoint or taking advantage of the fact that you have one, should be genuine, I presume, and take that angle on the content. And you said something really intriguing when you were talking about taking the contrarian viewpoint, about you'd be surprised how many outlets out there might be interested in this and how many placements you can make. And so that kind of leads me to want to pivot for a second to, what do you think agencies should also know about the right audiences, um, to be on the receiving end of their pitches for some of these news releases, and content? Because they're putting it on blast in many cases, and it's just sort of spraying out into the world without really landing anywhere. But I'm wondering, are there opportunities or platforms that are underutilized or not regarded or well or known well enough for brands to consider? And I'm sure you've experienced some of that
Right.
in
So
your world.
social media, people do not realize how important social media is becoming as the place that younger people are getting their content and, for lack of a better word, their news. And so, there are Instagram influencers that cover fashion that have more influence than many trade publications. There is someone that I follow on TikTok called Snackalator, who does a weekly roundup of new snacks hitting grocery store shelves. And he says, I pull all of these images off the wire. Companies announce a new product that they're releasing, a new flavor. And he's sitting there
Huh.
showing that roundup of new products each week. And he loves press releases because he says, if I waited until stuff hit my shelf, it would be too late. And this way people get excited about stuff before it comes out. So, do recognize that social media is a place that, getting these messages out, is a viable media outlet. And also, I think that even things that you might not think about is local media. I tell people when they call me and they're looking specifically only for local media to don't pay anyone. Don't, when it comes to local media, it's very easy to get. It seems like it's a Rubik's Cube, but if you think about it, there's probably less than 10 people in your market that would write about you.
Mm.
Find out at your local paper who covers your industry. It's generally one, maybe two people. You
Especially
know,
these days, right?
Right. And
Yeah.
so, get their email address. How about if it's not posted online? Call and ask. These people are not celebrities. They are not supposed to be closed systems. People think that. People think I can just ask for an email address. And it's like, yeah, they're a member of your community. And you're saying, I want to send them a pitch. I'm a local business and they cover my industry and I want to send this person a pitch. That's
Mm.
completely appropriate. And they should either give you the email address or forward you to that person so that you can get the email address directly from them.
Mm.
And again, if you're lucky enough to have a business magazine or business newspaper in your community, there's someone there that sort of covers your industry. Find out who that is. If it's a multiple people, pick the one that you feel would be most sympathetic to your business and test it. And then you can replicate that into other places. If you have a consumer product, maybe there's a consumer magazine in your area. I'm lucky enough in the Baltimore Metro, we have a sort of a high-end magazine called Baltimore. I think it's very similar to Washingtonian magazine in DC, and other places have it. And so, you find out what these places are, get their email address, and send a pitch. Don't bother writing a press release. You don't need to.
Mm.
You're going to pitch a really good idea to them, and you're going to position yourself as a local business who would be perfect to talk about it. I talked about the power of a quote. Put a great quote in there. And add that to your pitch. So it could be as short as a paragraph
Yeah.
and have an amazing quote. If you have images or photos, that's great. The best photos are mostly candid shots. It used to be 15 years ago, everybody wanted the professional stock photo, perfect lighting shot, but now people resonate with candid shots. A lot of these stories go online, and by having a photo, it's another bit of multimedia that people interact with. And if a journalist is looking at two stories of equal newsworthiness, they're going to gravitate to this one. But if it has a great image or photo that they can add to the website, and so keep that in mind. And also, uh, you know, uh, don't discount radio and TV. Sometimes you might, realize that there's a segment that appears on the TV every once in a while where they spotlight a business. Reach out to them and ask who the producer or booker of that segment was. And again, get their email address and tell them you'd like to pitch them you at a perhaps a future date that they could include, and have some, think about it. This is TV. So what are the things that they could do interacting visually with you or your business or your product that would be really great for people at home to be excited about, and sort of keep that in mind. And so, don't discount local media and also neighborhood papers. I've helped a lot of my clients over the years get columns in these neighborhood papers. They're usually weeklies. They're usually so chock full of ads that content is an afterthought. And if you approach them and say, "Hey, I'm a local chiropractor," or insert business here, and I would like to do a monthly column about wellness or health or whatever it is that is related to your business, and just say I would expect a byline or something at the end of the thing where I just talk a sentence about who I am and my business, here in the community. They're going to counter and want you to do it weekly. You're going to say, nope, nope, I'm only comfortable doing this monthly. They need content, so they will accept a monthly column if that sort of suits you. And so, don't discount that. It's a great way to stand out. It's an authority. People trust people who write columns and things like that, and they want to do business with you. So, keep things like that in mind. And do realize that there are opportunities both nationally and locally. But when it comes to local stuff, it's one of the easiest things that I think either an agency can do on behalf of their client, or even the client themselves can do on their behalf. But I think an agency would probably be better at sort of positioning it and sort of relating it. And I do recommend that people do it at least quarterly. But if you can do a cadence of every other month, that's even better. You want to be a sort of front of mind. And what you will find is you may pitch for 9 months and nothing happens. And all of a sudden you get a call. And it's like, I didn't pitch this guy recently. And they're like, hey, I'm working on this story. I know you've pitched me in the past, and I thought you would be the perfect example to put in here. When that happens, be prepared. Say, yes, I would be very willing to do that. If you want me to sit for a couple of minutes, I could write back with an amazing quote that you could use. Anything else that you'd want to make it easy to work with them.
Right, right, right.
And I am not great on the phone, so I always say, hey, I just tell them that. I say, I'm not really great on the phone, but I could take a few minutes and put together some quotes or some options for you, and email them over to you. And what's a good number to get back to you, just to check in. And boom, all of a sudden you'll find that's going to be your first pickup, and it gets easier. And in Baltimore, there is one company that I swear every time they're looking to plug in a local business, they just reach out to them. And I talked to them once at an entrepreneurs organization event, and I said, how do you get all this media attention? Are you a big advertiser? He says, I've never advertised in the Baltimore Sun.
Interesting.
He goes, but every time they call, we stop everything. And I may not be the right person to talk to, but I'll run down and I'll get my HR person, or I'll
Yeah.
get my director of marketing. And I know that in minutes, I will have exactly what they want, and I will give them an amazing quote. And we just drop everything, and we work with them. And we're so reliable that, yeah, you're right. We get picked up 3 or 4 times a year. And that's why.
Okay. So take advantage of the opportunities when they come, and don't and be a helper to the journalist. It's always good to remember. I'm wondering, you mentioned imagery. Have you seen a big uptick in the use of video in media outreach, either in press releases or in article proposals, things like that?
I have seen an uptick in people uh, using video. I have not seen an uptick in the actual media outlets using that video.
Okay.
I have talked to a few people about that, and they said that it's just like when they transform a press release and they write an article, they know they own that. But then when they start utilizing your video, at what point is it their property? And they're just like
Okay.
that's what a few people told me, and
Yeah.
I think that it's a bad reason. I don't know, and I find it hard to believe that that is the reason, but I definitely know that they're going to have to figure it out because you can look at the social media news feeds, video is prevalent. And if you're not working in video, you're at a disadvantage. So these places that people are sending the releases to are going to have to start utilizing that video because if they don't, they're going to get lost. And so I do tell people to continue to try it, but I have seen a few, but very few places use video. There should be a lot more people utilizing video, and they're just not at this point. I don't know if it's again having to get the video edited and and transforming it if the cost is just too much. But I'm not seeing a lot of people utilizing the videos that clients are sending. But I do see more clients adding the video to their releases, and of course the newswire loves that because they charge extra for that. But it is unfortunately not something that I feel that the media is using enough of.
It's not, so it's not going to be necessarily an attention grabber or a needle mover when you're making your outreach. Okay. Well, this has been fascinating and such great takeaways for agencies who are steering their clients through this process of trying to grab earned media's attention and get their clients' stories told, and the best ways to make certain that you can shake some trees and really make that happen, right? Because there's art and science involved here, and sometimes you can do it for a really, really long time. And like you said, 9 months, nothing happens, and then all of a sudden 4 articles, in 30 days or whatever. So it's a long game for sure. I want to thank you. This has been such an interesting conversation. And I've learned, as I said, a lot, and I'm sure folks listening have too. Where can people go to learn more about e-releases and how it helps and the services that it provides?
Right. So the website's eReleases.com. In the footer, you'll see we have a link for PR firms and marketing companies and agencies. We
Mhm.
do offer preferred pricing to them. And also, I have a free video masterclass. It's at eReleases.com/plan, PLAN. It's completely free, goes through some of these strategic types of releases that people should focus on, the ones that are more meaningful and more likely to result in earned media. And again, it's completely free. It's less than less than an hour long video because I realized I think the last course I bought was 24 hours of videos. I never even finished it and I paid for that course. So it's like I have to make it the TikTok equivalent of courses. So
There you go.
it is very easy and digestible. And I think there's some collateral with it, but in less than a couple of hours, you'll know everything you need about the types of releases that you should be focusing on.
Okay. This has been awesome, Mickey. Thank you so much for spending time with us on the Innovative Agents today. Really appreciate it. And thank you to all of you for joining us. It's been a really interesting conversation, and I hope you got as much out of it as I did. And until we meet again, everybody stay well.